the crappy laptop video again. My USB port is not working. I'm getting an error message. I don't know how to fix it. So back to the laptop camera. All right, today I want to talk about men's rights activists, the MHRM, and what we do to actually help men. Feminist critics on social media, on Facebook, on Tumblr, on Twitter, they like to make a few accusations. Whenever you try to bring up a discussion of issues that face boys and men, you get a couple different responses. In many cases, you'll get feminists saying, listen, men have privilege, they don't have any issues, they'll just outright deny that there are any issues that specifically affect boys and men. Of course, that's pretty easy to counter when you consider things like most incarcerated people are men, most homeless people are men. Men die earlier than women. I mean, that's a very odd expression of privilege. It's a privilege to die years earlier than women? Then you add race to the whole thing, and that whole argument simply blows up. Feminists would like you to think that a black, male, disabled veteran who's homeless, living on the street, has some kind of privilege over someone like me. Patently absurd. Obviously, he has no privileges over me whatsoever. The simple fact that he's a man gives him no privileges over me at all. So they upped the ante and they started with a new tactic, and it goes something like this. Okay, fine. Men have some issues, boys have some issues, but you know what? It's all the fault of patriarchy, and it's all because masculinity is toxic. That's the problem. It's all men's fault anyway. If they have issues, they did it to themselves. That's the argument. They're actually defining half of humanity as toxic, as a problem, as something that needs to be solved. That's a pretty sexist point of view. And of course, it's easy to take down because it is such a sexist point of view. So now they've mounted a new strategy, and it goes something like this. Okay, fine. Men have issues that need to be addressed, but MRAs and the MHRM don't do anything at all to help men. They do nothing. All they do is blame women for men's problems. Okay, there's two parts to that accusation. Let's take them separately. Number one, MRAs don't do anything. Number two, they blame women. Let's start with that second one first. MRAs blame women for men's problems. No, we don't. We blame feminists for some very specific problems. More specifically, that they stand in the way of solutions to some of the problems facing boys and men. You cannot use feminist as a synonym for women. Very few women identify as feminist. Almost everyone believes in gender equality. Equality of opportunity, mind you, not equality of outcome. You have the legal right to get on an oil rig if you want. If you don't want to, you don't have to. We can't then turn around and say oil rigs are sexist environments. No, women have had the right to pick up shovels and go do really physically hard, demanding, dirty work for a long time. They don't want to, and that's fine. We pay oil rig workers a whole lot more money for doing that tough work, and most people are fine with that. Of course, feminists are not, because they want equality of outcome. That a barista foaming milk at Starbucks should make the same amount of money as an oil rig worker? Please. Equality of opportunity. Almost everyone believes in that. And you also cannot deny the fact that there are a lot of male feminists. Feminist is not a synonym for women because there's male feminists. Okay? Feminism is an ideology. Anyone can embrace it if they're dumb enough. Fine. So, there goes that argument. Men's rights activists do not blame women for men's problems. We blame feminists for standing in the way of solutions to very specific problems that men have. Because they do. And we're going to talk about that. Now, let's take the core part of that argument. Men's rights activists and the men's human rights movement doesn't do anything to actually help men. Oh, really? Let's go through a few of the things that we are doing. We'll start with the big one. We're in the Supreme Court. We are in the Supreme Court of the United States of America, and we're winning. Specifically, cases that address paternity fraud. We are attacking women's legal right to fuck any guy she likes and pass the responsibility, the financial responsibility for the resulting child off onto any poor schmuck she can find. That is women's legal right to do. Except in Georgia, thanks to MRA Carnell Smith, who went before the state Supreme Court, went all the way up to the federal Supreme Court, and won his case. It is now illegal to commit paternity fraud in Georgia. There are cases pending in Maryland, in Ohio, and in Florida. The exact same challenge. State by state, we are going to the Supreme Court, and we are rescinding women's legal right to defraud men of child support. We're not going to stop until we have protected every man from paternity fraud. That's a direct result of the actions of a men's rights activist and the MHRM. Here's another big one. College campus rape allegations. Building, maintaining, and sharing a database of lawsuits. There are currently 81 lawsuits in progress. Men who have been falsely accused of sexual assault and rape, sanctioned on college campuses under rules that deny them due process. They are turning around and suing the universities who've done this to them. And in many cases, they're winning. You can go to this database at a Voice for Male Students. I will drop the link in the lower bar. I'll put all the links in the lower bar. You can go and see, confirm that what I'm saying is true. You can go and examine those lawsuits. You will find the names of the lawyers involved, you will find the legal filings, and you will find the outcomes, where the outcomes are not confidential and where the outcomes have been determined. This allows men who are falsely accused of rape and sexual assault on college campuses to access precedents, to understand how other men have won these suits. And it's an extremely valuable information source for anyone facing a college tribunal over rape or sexual assault. That is being maintained by Jonathan Taylor at a Voice for Male Students. He's made that publicly available to everyone. The MHRM and men's rights activists are making it easier for men to resist false rape allegations on campus, to turn around and to hold those schools accountable. We're not going to stop until these ridiculous laws that deny men due process and refuse them the right to defend themselves are gone. Men's rights activists and the MHRM are working to protect men from unjust college tribunals, and we're helping them hold schools accountable by providing information about what cases are ongoing, what lawyers are likely to help them, and how to win, strategies for winning. All right, another big one, domestic violence. Very common. I've seen this so many times. Feminists saying, well, why don't men's rights activists have any domestic violence shelters? Feminists built all these domestic violence shelters for women, so why can't you build some for men? Well, feminists didn't build domestic violence shelters using money they raised from a bake sale. They have access to billions of dollars of federal funding, which they have lobbied hard to get, and they will lobby even harder to keep. The average domestic violence shelter requires $3 to $4 million per year to run. That's the operating costs. You don't raise that kind of money at a bake sale. We are, in fact, lobbying governments all over the world to create domestic violence shelters for men and children who are fleeing violent women. In Australia, the New South Wales Police created a poster campaign to raise awareness of men as victims of domestic violence. That obviously comes out of the police budget to do that. That's one of the only examples you can find of governments funding and awareness of men as domestic violence victims. Men's rights activists, particularly the Canadian Association for Equality, used their own money to purchase space on a billboard in Toronto to do the same thing. Put up a poster drawing awareness to men and children as victims of domestic violence, as victims of violent women. Who opposes any attention being drawn to men and children as victims of women's violence? That would be feminists. In fact, in Australia, feminists are working furiously to recreate something like the American law, which the American law against domestic violence is called the Violence Against Women Act. The act itself completely exonerates women and does not address women and their violence against children and their violence against men. Men's human rights activists and MRAs are working very hard to draw attention to men as victims of domestic violence, to children as victims of violent women, and to lobby governments to begin supporting men and children who need temporary shelter from violent women. In addition to the domestic violence billboard campaign, we've run a few other postering campaigns. There's the Don't Be That Girl campaign that ran over Canada, across Canada, garnered national media attention. Don't Be That Girl is essentially highlighting the Center for Disease Control numbers that demonstrate male victims of rape, which stats are not collected under rape stats. They're collected under another category of sexual assault. The number of men coerced or made to penetrate, which is a very awkwardly worded description. These are men who were coerced into sex, who were forced into sex. And remember, this Violence Against Women Act, any man that fights back in that situation is likely to find himself arrested for assault. So the numbers from the CDC are virtually identical. Rape overall is not nearly as big a problem as feminists make it out to be, but the number of lady rapists is roughly equal to the number of gentlemen rapists. You can use those two words together. Women are just as likely to rape. Don't Be That Girl drew attention to that. It also addressed the issue of false allegations of rape. You don't get to wake up in the morning after sex that you regret and define it as rape. Who would like to see that happen? Well, that would be feminists, of course. That's the entire heart of the Yes Means Yes affirmative consent laws that are in place on college campuses. Yes Means Yes basically allows any woman to define any sexual encounter, whether that man disappointed her, whether he rejected her, whether he moved on, if he made her feel bad in some way, she can retroactively define that sexual act as rape, and he has to be in a position to prove that he obtained consent. It's an inversion of everything we understand about justice. You are guilty until proven innocent. The woman does not have to provide any evidence of any kind to support her case. She only has to describe how she feels. The accused man is not allowed to defend himself. He is not allowed to have legal counsel, and he's not allowed to cross-examine witnesses. This is the feminist world that is in effect right now. But all those lawsuits from men who take the results from college tribunals, take them out into the actual court of law where we actually practice justice, they're winning. And they're going to continue to win. And they're going to win some big, big awards. And we will shut these insane laws down. Men's rights activists and the MHRM are working to make college campuses a safer place for men. All right, another big public awareness campaign was Fathers for Justice in the UK. Fathers for Justice have run a number of different advertising campaigns addressing the fact that courts and our family law system actively tear apart men and their children. They actively interrupt the bonds between men and their children. They don't consider men to be equal parents. Who supports family courts? and family laws, that would be feminists. Feminists literally oppose equality when it comes to shared custody following the breakdown of a relationship. Feminists oppose equality. MRAs and the MHRM are running public awareness campaigns to draw people's attention to the fact that equality in the case of custody after a relationship breaks down is a worthy, admirable goal. But feminists like to wave the dictionary around and say that they're all about equality, but when it comes time to actually embrace the ideals of equality, no. They have the privilege of being assumed the more important caregiver, and they have no intention of giving it up. MRAs and the MHRM are fighting for fathers and their children around the world. The single most important thing that men's rights activists and the MHRM is doing to help men and boys, all men everywhere, all boys everywhere, is to change the cultural narrative. We are in the nation's research institutes. We are writing, we are vlogging, we are making videos, we are making all kinds of articles and blog posts. We're all over social media, changing the cultural narrative. Men's rights is a very, very simple concept. Men's rights is a conversation about gender and equality that includes men and boys and women and girls, and refuses to define half of them as toxic problems that must be solved. Men's rights is a conversation about gender and equality that refuses to engage in sexist stereotypes about men. We are interested in facts, in evidence, in proof, and we believe that men and boys are worthy of the same kindness, consideration, compassion, and care as women and girls. Why? Because men are human beings. What other reason do you need?